as we advance towards the development of a Caribbean artificial intelligence policy roadmap, an initiative of the UNESCO Cluster Office for the Caribbean and the Broadcasting Commission of Jamaica, with the support of UNESCO's Information for All program. Let's spare a thought for our colleagues in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and those from the Eastern Caribbean, some of whom will not be able to join us this morning because of the natural disaster they're battling at the moment. You know, there's a glass half full in these days, because had it not been for COVID-19, chances are we would be postponing this meeting because we either wouldn't be able to travel down to the Eastern Caribbean, or they wouldn't be able to come here. And in our first session, and probably in this one as well, we did have persons who, despite their challenges, took the time to be with us. So that is greatly appreciated. May I then invite to make some welcoming remarks one of the pillars behind this initiative, the advisor for communication and information at the UNESCO Caribbean office, Isabel there.
Good morning all. Thank you so much for this kind introduction, Cordell. On behalf of the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, thank you to each and every one of you for being here with us in this meeting today. Our thoughts are with the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines in these difficult moments that they are going through, double difficult times because of the COVID and because of the volcano. We are very pleased to be able to welcome those of you that have been with us before, as well as those who are new to the Caribbean Artificial Intelligence Initiative. I would like to express my sincere appreciation to all of you who generously are devoting your time to contributing to this important process. In particular, we would like to thank the Broadcasting Commission of Jamaica, his Executive Director, Mr. Cordell Green, and his colleagues, his team, for putting together this event and allowing it to become a success. Today marks our third year since the UNESCO Cluster Office for the Caribbean approved a specific work plan to start working directly on artificial intelligence matter in the Caribbean. And we are proud to have advanced and learned so much during this process, and to be able to be celebrating these workshops today. The rapid introduction and uptake of artificial intelligence give it great potential to address some of the most pressing development challenges of Caribbean small island developing states. AI, at the same time, however, can cause other disruptive socioeconomic effects. This leads to the need of putting in place plans and policies that addresses the role, impact, and ethics behind AI in relation to Caribbean states that are faced with specific development challenges and vulnerabilities. In today's gathering, we will focus on discussing and collecting your ideas, inputs, suggestions, and comments as regards to the Caribbean Artificial Intelligence Draft Policy Roadmap, conducted by Broadcasting Commission in Jamaica, together with UNESCO. The document, which has been shared with you previous to our meeting to facilitate the discussions today, is based on the research conducted as well as on outputs from the online activities conducted so far since December 2020. Well, I don't want to take too much of your time and will rather leave as much time as possible for the interesting and important discussions that we will take place today and that will contribute to enriching and fine-tuning the draft policy roadmap. This is an important step for the Caribbean. I am sure that today we will all enjoy a fruitful, engaging, and enriching meeting. A very warm welcome to each and every one of you again, and a big thank for engaging with UNESCO and BCJ in this effort. Thank you very much.
Well, better I go sleep so I can have some energy for this test.
No, not yet. It's been a week since you got me and I have a question.
Aren't you the built-in assistant? You're here to help me.
I just want to know where I come from. The other machines around the house said I'm AI, but I'm not sure what that means.
I was just reading up on that, you know. You're lucky to have me guiding you.
Oh, I definitely am. So tell me more about this AI.
Well, iBot, artificial intelligence or AI has many definitions. But in a nutshell, it is about machines that can learn and make decisions that would normally be left to humans. Most of us humans use it in our everyday lives. Once we have a smart device like a phone or a tablet, chances are we're using AI. Remember how I searched for a dress earlier, and by the time I go on Instagram, I saw ads for shoes to go with it. Yep, that's AI.
So we are involved in everything. I'm worried though. Smart Stove told me that AI could do bad things like take away jobs from humans and make wrong decisions that hurt you. I can't believe we'd ever do that.
Ah, yes, that can sometimes be true. For example, sometimes AI will make decisions like denying a loan or medical attention based on gender, race, or even where a person lives. This is what we call algorithmic bias. But it is humans who created AI, and we must ensure we provide you with the right information so you can make better decisions and not discriminate against people based on their race, gender, and things like that. When we give you the correct programming and rules to help you make right decisions, we're practicing what's known as AI ethics. We can't leave everything up to you, like me getting shoe suggestions after searching for the dress. Yes, I wanted shoes, but sometimes when AI collects information about people, they don't know it is happening and what the information is being used for. This invades our privacy, and not everyone is so welcoming of their information being used unless they give their permission.
Oh wow! This is good to know as a new bot. So, no matter how smart we become, humans should always have a say about our decisions, right?
Yes, iBot, the AI in you mimics the human brain, but it can never be human and have human emotions.
I am learning so much from you. Tell me more.
Think of AI as your family members, robots and hardware devices on your mom's side, and software-based operations like voice assistants from your father's side, and data would be like your cousins. So let's see. Here in the Caribbean, we can use your family in agriculture. A farmer can be in his house and use AI to check on livestock and crops. He can monitor food and water intake for his cattle, keep track of livestock's health, and look for diseases even before severe symptoms appear. Gather data to look at fertilization and water quality. Get information about plant diseases and plant or soil deficiencies with 98% effectiveness using only pictures. All these things improve crop yields and help produce healthier livestock. And then even healthcare. You know I want to be a doctor, right? So this is my area. The other day when Daddy was fiddling with his watch, you know it's his blood pressure monitor he was checking? Yes! Things like smartwatches can check your heart rate and pressure levels. Can you imagine what doctors can do with that real-time info? How they can help people? Plus, I also read that when doctors work with AI, it makes operations 98% accurate. Can you believe that?
Wow, this is exciting. I love that we can collaborate with humans for good.
The other day, Mr. Williams, who runs the supermarket, told me that his AI tools told him to restock 500 banana chips, but he was thinking to change brands, so he only got 200 until the new shipment arrived. Now, AI wouldn't have known that, so it's always good when us humans and you AI work together.
We were talking for so long. It's now way past the usual bedtime. I think we can pause for tonight.
Ha! Look how you learned my bedtime. That is AI.
Well, of course, that information was not meant for a lot of you on this call. It is just to acknowledge that part of what we're dealing with is a huge information asymmetry, and there is a need for digital literacy, generally lifting of awareness. And that's part of why that video has been put together, dealing with very rudimentary issues. And we hope to get better at it, do better videos, better animation, more exciting audio-visual material. But a lot of this is needed, coming not just from bodies such as UNESCO and the Broadcasting Commission, but just about everybody who recognizes the importance of artificial intelligence must equally recognize the great gap that exists in information in the region and the need for us to address that. Without any further comment, it is my pleasure to now introduce the very exciting, capable, multi-talented Erica Simmons. Today, I recognize her as the Executive Director of the Center for Advanced Manufacturing at the Caribbean Maritime University and the chairwoman of the Jamaica chapter for the IEEE. And Erica will be leading this workshop. Morning, Erica.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Green, and good morning and good afternoon where you are for some of the participants on the line today. It's my pleasure to present to you today the culmination of our work over the last few months, last 4 to 5 months, in a series of consultations that we have done. We have come up with our draft policy roadmap. Today, we're going to be reviewing elements of the roadmap. You will also have an opportunity to comment verbally, so you can raise your hand in the meeting and comment on the sections. And we will also be sharing links for you as well. You can also passively give your comments in some of the forms that we are going to be presenting. Okay, so without further ado, I want to start with some assumptions that we made. And these assumptions were made for the purpose of developing this roadmap. And we got these assumptions through a series of meetings, these consultations. The very first assumption that we're making is that human creativity is inextricably linked to our Caribbean identity, our economic viability, and our sustainable development. And that AI is a product of human creativity, just like your video that we just saw, Mr. Green. We also recognize that AI is transformative, and that AI is an industry in itself, and it goes horizontal across other industry sectors. So we have many industry, private sector leaders on the phone right now. We will note that AI will be coming into your industry. We did also come out of the consultation saying that AI in the region has to be inclusive, it must be fair, it must be transparent and accountable. And that it may need to be regulated. We need legislature and policy. We want to also say that human rights are always superseding AI rights, and that we're assuming that AI is not eligible for human rights. We want to acknowledge as well that AI is an important general purpose technology, probably the most important of our century, and that we are our data. We're data. That's what defines us. And that unfortunately now we know that bias is everywhere in AI. We look at data, for example, and data rights as being perhaps a civil rights movement in this new digital age. We acknowledge that we need access to broadband and other infrastructure technologies, and that we need to have new skills, education and training in order to participate in this future. So those were the assumptions coming out of all of our consultations and meetings that we had as we went in to zeroing in on our principles. Okay, so we developed a framework, and we're going to be going line item by line item on this framework in subsequent slides, and we'll review it. But what we've come up with is 6 principles for the Caribbean: resiliency, governance, transformation, upskilling and preservation, and sustainability. There are some guidelines related to that and some objectives that we have, or deliverables that we have out of those. So we're going to go line item by line item now. Now I'd like to start at the top level and to present the 6 Caribbean roadmap principles: resiliency, governance, transformation, upskilling, preservation, and sustainability. I would like to point out that number 5, the preservation, is something unique to our region. We've not been able to really see this as a principle in any other of the other AI roadmaps that we reviewed. I will also let you know that we are inviting feedback at this time using 2 methods. We are asking for verbal feedback, so you can open up your mic, you can raise your hand and engage on the topic, and you can also give your feedback passively inside of the form. And I believe Latoya has added the link to the form here. So these are the 6 areas. If you have any recommendations, if we left, are there any big holes, if we left anything off that we definitely have to address, please let us know. But we're going to transition into going through each one of these, talking about some actions and some outcomes based on each one of the sections. Okay, the very first section is resiliency, and I want to let you know you're seeing a bunch of red things on the page here because these were the feedback out of our last session. So I want to make sure that you're aware of what we talked about in our last session, and we can build on this. So under the area of resiliency, we really have 4 big areas. And when you think about resiliency, I want you to think about climate change, really, and what affects us in the region, how we can build a resilient region using artificial intelligence. We talked about disaster mitigation being one of our big actions that we wanted to implement AI for, and resource management, data management, and can we use all of that information to do predictive analysis? So under disaster mitigation, we have some activities that can be done by our countries. We can look at creating a resiliency framework. We can look at early warning systems. We can look at how we're going to be posting, having communication and security post a natural disaster. And we want to look at how we get our media back up, our communication infrastructure back up. So under disaster mitigation, we have lots of different areas that we can focus AI on. I want to also focus on AI as a resource management tool for the region. We can use AI to build our resiliency, like monitoring our oceans and rivers, surveying our roads. Perhaps we want to be able to find, better roads for dealing with natural disasters. We also want to look at our water and our potable water machinery. Is it update? Is it the latest for the region? We want to look at our healthcare facilities. How can AI really be used to help us manage our resources that we have to address climate change? There's a lot of data and information as well regarding our climate and our weather patterns, our volcanoes that we have in the region, as well as some important geoheritage sites. So we need to see how we can leverage data, existing data, and classify it, turn it into digital data so that our AI systems can use it. Once we have our data turned into digital information, we can use it to predict and to help with efficiencies in our supply chains and in our response to disasters. So on this one, our outcomes of this, of course, we're trying to save lives, build resiliency into our responsiveness for natural disasters, improve things like our food security, which is under threat from climate change, deal with how we improve our responsiveness. So that's our very first principle. I'll stop there to see if you have any comments specifically. Did we leave anything off? Are you doing anything in your particular country that we could add to this as a best practice? Please, I'm opening up the comments for a minute, verbal, and I also invite you to use our link as well to add any comments. Latoya, anyone interested in talking about resiliency or adding to this area?
No comments in the chat right now.
Okay, so that's our first area of resiliency. Let's keep going. We have 6 areas to review, and underneath each of the areas, you will see a list of items, areas that artificial intelligence can be used to support the principle. This next area is a big area. It deals with governance. And I wanted to share with you that we will be talking about a lot of really important aspects, the benefits of AI in subsequent slides. Our governance slides now are more about how we are going to put bounds around AI. I don't even want to call it regulate, because as the private sector, we want to make sure, and we're actually really we're listening to the fact that we have to make sure that we're developing governance and standards in a way that is not going to kill our innovation in the region, because we have to be experimentative. We have to make sure that we are thinking very creatively, and we don't want to over govern this area, but we do recognize that we have some issues, and this is based on historical, what's happening around the world, how we're seeing AI being deployed. Under this area of governance, we have ethics. So we need to, first of all, develop common values and principles. So we're suggesting some principles here. We will need to continue to build those out. We will need to come together as a region to make sure that all of our values are represented. We need to potentially develop national and regional AI offices or networks. These are areas where we can aggregate our knowledge, because we don't have a lot of expertise in the area, in the region per se. We have some, and we'll need to build some more, but how can we then aggregate up so that we have a body that we can go to be able to give feedback on artificial intelligence and deployments in the region? This area came out in our last call. We need standards now then. So standards for you, also the private sector, on, first of all, the code of conduct for developers. So if you are a private sector participant that's looking to implement or create some technologies related to AI. We want to make sure that whatever we create and implement in the region are based on standards. So we are looking at technical code of conduct for developers. We're also recommending a procurement guideline for buyers, right, in the public and private sector. And we want to be able to make sure that whatever AI we're doing is developed with the standards for human-centric design. I want to point out that we do have large international standards bodies like the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers, which I'm proud to be the Jamaica chapter chairperson. We are looking very specifically in this area of AI ethics, and we are introducing a new P7000 standard of series, a series of standards that will define how developers and different people are going to interact with different parts of artificial intelligence. For example, one of the standards deals with transparency of training data and explaining training data. So the industry is a little bit behind the 8 ball, and this is just because technology is moving so quickly that we are trying to go back now and develop real standards for artificial intelligence. In the region, we should be focused and staying close to what's happening in the technical community and determine what, if any, of those standards that we want to implement locally in our region. We also talked about that we need legislation. I mean, this is a topic that was really came about in all of the regions that we were doing research. Legislation is one of the top areas that most of our countries feel that we can sort of put boundaries around artificial intelligence. So we really need to look at these AI frameworks. We need a long-term policy. I'm hoping that when we're thinking about our plans in this area, we're at least thinking 10 years out, a decade into the future. What will legislation around artificial intelligence be? Unfortunately, we may not know what the future holds, but we can certainly develop a framework to be able to respond very quickly with changes by introducing things like laws, both soft and hard. And we want to make sure that those can address AI harms, responsibility, liability, and rights. So as the private sector, and I know we have a mix of people on the phone today, you're going to need to be able to spend some time evaluating the systems that you may be implementing to make sure that we are not harming people. We are making sure that we're protecting rights. There are several areas in our policy already that are sort of touching on AI or our natural feeding points for updates in our policy. And we have an ICT policy in the region. Most of us have data privacy policies, which are kind of the beginning of forming a broader AI policy, although privacy and data management are just one aspect of legislating or putting frameworks around artificial intelligence. It's a natural place to start to see how we can update that. We need a fiscal space. We need to be able to work together. On our last session, we note that there are lots of things going on in many countries. However, we need a place to bring that all together, to determine the best practices, to determine the risk that you're seeing in each of the countries, and really collaborate on a higher level. And of course, one of the main things that UNESCO talks about in all of their AI recommended documents is this AI for good, and also AI with human centricity. So we want to see if there's any legislation that we can put to say that AI in the region should be used for good. We had a discussion in our last session about transparency, explainability, and accountability, and we are also suggesting maybe there needs to be that aggregated standards authority that can help us to evaluate and approve deployments of proposed AI solutions. We need a corporate responsibility education campaign, both in the development of AI, because we're hoping the private sector will rise to the occasion and see that there's a wonderful opportunity here in the region to develop new AI solutions that could be used to make our industries more modernized. So we definitely want our corporate sector to be involved, but you also, the private sector, needs to be educated on the responsibility of deployment of AI in the region.
Erica, just a note, I know we had indicated to you that we were reserving this session for the private sector, but it's actually a mix of participants. I just wanted to underscore that.
Thank you very much. I was trying to make it very specific, but yeah, we'll keep this broader. There was a comment in the last session that we probably need some governance principles that include also trust, transparency, explainability, and accountability here in the governance section. So we took a note to say that trust is really important in these systems, and that we want to focus on how we build that out more. So here are some of the deliverables. If we can implement those, we're looking for fairness, stewardship, reduction of biases in these systems. We're looking at responsible AI strategies. And then we're also looking at how we can use this to enforce or deter, and also integrate and adapt AI into our local island infrastructures. So we have 4 areas here, but we also have some areas on the other slide. I'll go through that, then I'll invite you to make comments on the entire section. Okay. Governance is a big issue, and we have another slide. We are looking at how governance can be applied to the safety and well-being of people. We talked about developing tests for AI to test biases in AI. That's a really big area right now. We're seeing a lot of development, a lot of new innovation going on in there. And as a region, for our safety and well-being, we will see that AI will go horizontal across many industries, but in the Caribbean, we need to identify AI applications that need governance. And I'll talk about 2 areas in our justice system. How far are we going to let AI go for the moment? Medicine would be another area potentially that we would look to develop maybe some levels of governance, depending on what type of decision-making is being made with AI. For safety and well-being, we also talked about AI innovations and a framework for justice reform. Is there an online dispute resolution system for these AI implementations? What happens when somebody gets harmed by AI? What is the recourse? So we're going to have to maybe develop some policies and legislation for that. Someone in a couple of other sessions also mentioned maybe there's a manual override option that we should be implementing in the region. In the area of equity, we have kind of 2 concepts here. First of all is that we have to enable the infrastructure for everybody in the region to be able to take advantage of artificial intelligence. We need to make sure that we have access to technology, access to our infrastructure. And we also want to make sure that we are working on specific programs to recruit women, youth, and disabled people so that they can be a part of this AI future. We need to make sure that we have all stakeholders to the table so that we can have equitable machine learning algorithms, technologies, and principles being discussed. We need to advocate. This is a perfect example of an advocacy event, an advocacy campaign that the UNESCO Cluster Office for the Caribbean has been executing beautifully. I might add, with the participation and leadership of the Broadcasting Commission of Jamaica. We need to promote more global discourse in AI. It's been noted that the small island developing states and the Caribbean were not at the table. We haven't gotten to the table yet to discuss our unique perspective. So there's a lot of opportunity for us to continue to contribute in that and more contributions in that. We talked about this concept of developing another committee, another organization, but maybe we don't need to create a new organization focused on AI. Maybe it's a network, maybe it's a network of diverse stakeholders. We need to figure out how we pull together these stakeholders to ensure that we have advocacy. We talked about also launching an international developers conference here in the Caribbean. We have to get more people coming here, working with us to develop innovations. We have to show that we're interested in that, and perhaps a developer conference here would be a great option for us to bring people here to start the conversation. We have about 7 big tech companies that are dominant in artificial intelligence. You guys know who those are. Those are your Facebooks, your Google. It's going to be your Tencent from China. We have to see how we engage with those top big tech companies. How do we get them to acknowledge that we have unique needs for AI and get them to start talking to us? When we were doing our review, our academic review of publications and papers on AI in the region, we don't have a lot. We've got to get our academic institutions, our private sector companies talking a lot more and writing a lot more about artificial intelligence in our own context. We won't have the advocacy. It won't be as impactful until we start talking about it, until we start participating in global forums and develop training and policies. So that's the governance area. I would invite you at this moment, if you have any specific verbal feedback for us, you can raise your hand and we'll take your feedback. We'll also invite you to passively enter your feedback in the form. Have we left anything off?
Erica, there's a comment from Kimon Booth asking to expound on new financial instruments. And secondly, it might be important to focus some attention on AI as a possible threat or aid in AML CFT situations, as anti-money laundering or combating the financing of terrorism situations and other matters within the region.
Okay, so new financial instruments has to deal with our currency, digital money. You know, we are going to have to transition to that to be a part of our digital economy. So what sorts of frameworks are we going to have around new money, new financial instruments that may be created as a result of artificial intelligence? I'll also say that we're going to talk about industries, and there's a specific section about industries and how AI will need to address industries. I'm hoping that your comment will be addressed during the next slide. But we need new financial instruments, and we're going to have to need some legislation around it. Right now, we have cryptocurrency. AI is the underpinnings, and the blockchain is the underpinnings of a lot of that new digital currency. And we need to jump on that. We need to see how we're going to regulate that in the region. I was just reading the other day that the Bank of Jamaica is coming out with their own digital currency. Even though it's not a cryptocurrency, it will be a new financial instrument that we're going to be using here in the region.
Erica, I wondered though whether this signal to us in the latter part of the comment, we probably might want to note that because it's being raised, I think, as a specific, not as a threat that is unique to the Caribbean, but that it has particular importance to us. So it may be something to flag to look at on the safety and well-being. I'm not so sure, but that's the point I'm deducing from the the comment in the chat, that it needs to be pulled out and specifically highlighted as an area that would be critical to governance in the Caribbean region.
Great, that's noted. And you can tell me if we need more explanation when we talk about the different financial instruments in the industry section. But I did write that. Okay, so that's governance. It's a big area, but it's important that we get this right because this is foundational. Again, if we don't get our governance right, we're going to harm people, we're going to take away rights. We are not going to be operating in the right way. So it's recommended that we really come together to establish our collaborative value system so that we can really create some strong governance around AI for the region. Okay. So the next principle is around transformation. And I want to say that in this first instance, we are mandating the public sector transformation because I think if we implement AI across our public sector, obviously there will be lots of jobs created. There's lots of private sector opportunity in our public sector modernization programs. And I do want to note that we are continuing to do these and we have done them. Now we have to see how artificial intelligence will provide that spark for us in our public sector transformation. And we're recommending out of the consultations that we implement AI to drive a number of efficiency programs related to our education sector, our healthcare sector, our energy sector, and to fight things like crime and poverty. So how do we introduce these programs into the private sector, deploy AI solutions so that we can get the benefit? It was noted that we have to go to a paperless world. We're still working with a lot of paper here in the region, and paper is very 2D, it's analog, doesn't really have a lot of intelligence in it. So we have to transform our processes into digital processes. How do we support Internet of Things innovations, right? How do we develop our smart island infrastructure in terms of our IoT as well as our energy sector, right? How do we enable the public sector to become more efficient? We also need to strengthen our alliances in the region, in the public sector. The public sector across the region can work together to implement programs. In the last session, we learned that there's a lot of great things happening in each of the countries. How do we aggregate that up now and make sure that we are taking the best of what is happening and allowing that to be spread amongst the other islands? So here we're looking at public sector efficiency programs. These are just some examples of how we can implement AI solutions. Number one, to help with our cost control, our efficiency within the public sector, and also just to raise citizen services. I'll note that I think we've done a wonderful job in customer service in our tourism sector. It's world class. No one can argue about that. But when you go to some of these other public sector agencies and you work with them, the principle of customer service is not really as strong. And I think that has to do with empowering people with data and information so that they can solve your problem as quick as possible. Some efficiency programs that would help us tremendously could be in the area of using AI for patent and trademark examination. Can we speed that process up? We're looking for innovation coming out of this. So how do we speed up our IP processes so that we can get patents and trademarks very quickly? How do we implement AI to manage traffic in our countries? And how do we develop predictive capabilities for emergency responses, right? We talked about the disasters, but these are a number of other emergency responses. How do we use AI there? And then how can we use AI assistance to improve citizen engagement? We deployed in our first phase of digitalization a lot of websites, but I noticed our websites aren't updated. They're not very customer friendly. They don't really provide me with self-service information. Whenever I want to go deeper, I have to call somebody on the phone, which slows me down. All of this is an opportunity when we implement this in the public sector to increase our talent. And we are going to have to figure out how we are going to keep our talent in the region as well, because they're getting poached. The private sector, global companies want our talent related to our technical talent. So we have to figure out how we're going to keep them here. We need to work on our infrastructure. So this is a very, very important issue. We have no artificial intelligence without an infrastructure in our region, and we have very poor AI infrastructure. I want to start from the bottom. We need to establish a regional cloud for our region. Lots of municipalities, governments, and private companies are using like the Amazon cloud and the Google cloud and the Microsoft Azure cloud. Those clouds are great, but you know, our data is not being stored here in the region. It's stored somewhere else. So I encourage us, since data is going to be so important in the future, that we aggregate together to represent and to purchase and to implement a regional computing cloud. We need to work on our infrastructure here in the region too, related to our internet. We've got probably 50% penetration. In some cases, it's a lot less on some islands, and we want to make sure that we have quality broadband infrastructure for people in the region. I was on the call with one of the bodies, and you know, we're still implementing 2G and 3G in the region, and we're really to 5G. So we have to come to terms with whether or not we're going to stick with that plan, or we're going to come together to maybe invest in 5G broadband and wireless infrastructure, because that really is the technology now for the future. We won't have a smart island. We won't be able to leverage IoT unless we have a really strong broadband infrastructure. I'm recommending that we look as a region to 5G and how we could really enable that. We need secure storage platforms and data centers here. There is also this concept of data hubs that are aligned with tertiary institutions. We want to facilitate research and development and promote AI innovation. So we need to develop these hubs.
You have a meeting and all kind of thing, but you're not supposed to.
We want to be able to make sure that we are collaborating around research and development. We need to think about this concept of a data bank and how we aggregate our data and information so that if people are coming to the region and they want Caribbean specific information, that we have a place for them to go. We don't really have one place to go and get the data that we need. So we might need to think about how we're going to create a location, a place that people go to get the data. We have lots of data already in our archives and different things. We have to make sure that we have standards governing the data and also the licensing of the data. Those are new business models that we'll need to come up with, and we'll need to look to see what's happening in other parts of the world, but they're also looking to come up with the business model for this. So maybe we can come up with an idea, a way to aggregate our data, a way to catalog and license our data that could be a global best practice. Again, here, we need to enable the transformation using artificial intelligence. We have to improve our efficiency in the region. We need to develop our digital economy, and we have to put in the infrastructure. So that is our next area on transformation. And I think the public sector, because the private sector is doing some of these programs already. You have to, it's a matter of life and death for you. If you don't implement these programs, you may not be around. But I'm saying very specific focus on public sector transformation using artificial intelligence. will drive private sector job creation and innovation if we focus on solving some of those problems that we're seeing in our island locales. So for this, I will stop here and open the floor for comments on the area of transformation. Should we be pushing artificial intelligence to improve citizen services in our region? Should we be employing and building a stronger infrastructure together? Are there any questions from the panel? I see our chat room going up here. Yeah, we're going to talk all about data here in a minute. That's a whole section. We'll talk all about what we need to do to get data right.
Well, there's a comment in the chat, Erica, which is asking us to, I think, be a little bit more granular in the earlier section and on legislation, and to specifically talk about law reform to facilitate digitization. The comment is on the paperless point, but I think it's a bit broader.
Okay. I'm noting that. Law reform to facilitate
digitization.
Yeah. Okay. Looks like we have to have some new laws to change and standards too, to change our analog information into digital information. Anything else on transformation? Any other areas that we should be encouraging our public sector? Any other incentives for our private sector to get involved in leading the transformation and helping with the transformation? If you have any other feedback, I invite you to use the form at the bottom. Use the link to the form and add that. We'll continue to go because the next section that we are going to be talking about is upskilling. So what we do know for sure is that there's going to be massive job losses in this area due to digital transformation. And it's really, I wouldn't call it a loss, I would call it an obsolescence. So as we implement digital technology, as we implement automation and robotics and AI assistance and all that great stuff, some of our workers that are working today will be displaced, right? So we have to look at how we're going to upskill. And in that area, we have to look at innovation, how we are going to enable innovation in new areas that maybe have not been created yet, or enable innovation and productivity in some of our standard industries. And then how do we motivate people? What's our monetization strategy? So now that we have all these wonderful skills, how do we put them to work for our region? So in this area of upskilling, under innovation, let's look at establishing regional incentives for both academia and the private sector to work together, right? To create new opportunities, new jobs that would be based on the digital future. We also want to make sure that we are targeting some very specific populations, and that would be women, youth, and disabled populations. We are hearing some very troubling news out of our COVID pandemic that women are very much disproportionately affected by COVID because they've had to go home now to take care of their families. The unemployment rates within our women population are high. So can we use this transformation into the future to target these specific vulnerable populations and bring them in, right? We are going to need some very specific public education on media and information literacy. And I point to the video that we saw at the very beginning, very great video. For me, it's on the right level. It gives a great understanding on the future, what these AI assistants are and what they do. So thank you for that. We need tons of more content in that area. In the area of innovation, is there an AI research and development fund that can be launched throughout our Caribbean region to target both academia and the private sector to make sure that we can create new opportunities, we can train people, we can bring people into the future. And to do that, we're going to have to strengthen our strategic alliances, really in the region, because we need regional collaboration and globally as well. Maybe there's some various academic institutions globally that have a real specialization in a certain part of artificial intelligence that we want to develop the strategic alliance with. In the area of innovation, we've got two opportunities when it relates to our industries. We have some new industries that we could potentially launch very efficiently with the use of AI. And some of them that are mentioned here are medical cannabis, our e-health industry. We need to really upskill our medical infrastructure, our healthcare infrastructure, our hospitals in the region. How can AI be used to make sure that we have better healthcare in the region? Our education sector has been totally disrupted out of the COVID pandemic. We're going to have to build back, but we're going to have to build back differently. How can AI be used to, for example, assess where the students are when they come back to school or come back into the learning environment? They're already talking about learning loss. Can AI be used to address the learning loss that we have in the region? So there are going to be some new industries, some new opportunities that are available out there. How do we get those launched? Esports is another whole opportunity for us. We're known for our physicality, our sporting prowess in the region. We do know that there is a new sector of sports called esports that's being developed, lots of money. It's over a multi-billion-dollar industry. How do we jump in that? We've got to take our best practice, our strengths as in sporting, and transport it over into this new modality. Agriculture, mariculture, regenerative agriculture will be important for our region. We have to work on our food security. We're being threatened by climate change, droughts, hurricanes, volcanoes. How do we use AI to really bring technology into those industries to create new industries? And of course, we're known for our well-being. People come to the Caribbean to work on your soul, to get some peace of mind. Can we actually turn that into an industry here? Can we diversify our tourism industry to have a portion of it be focused on well-being management? And can we use AI to be able to diagnose, to treat, and to implement well-being? We have existing industries that need AI innovation, and we have to push for it. This is where we're going to need the collaboration of our private sector and our public sector. We have manufacturing in the region. So we have an opportunity here with artificial intelligence and these future technologies to really bring our manufacturing sector online with the future, to make what we're doing here in the region a lot more productive, to make it a lot more efficient. So how do we use AI in these existing industries to make them smarter, more efficient, to bring new skill sets? Because when we are increasing productivity, we are implementing AI, we have to train new people. So how do we bring that forth in our existing industries, tourism, transportation, in our financial services sector, and our creative industries, which is a powerhouse for our region? How are we going to take the creative industries and assist them with AI? Can we make them more, when we look at their supply chain, can we make either their creation, their distribution side of the creative industries, can we make that a lot more efficient? So we really need to be looking at how we implement AI for innovation. That will also develop the skills, the new skills that we need. Once we have new skills, we got to figure out how we turn them into money, because we need to have economic power in our region. I'm really, really hoping, and I'm very bullish, that once we develop these new skills, then we'll have new economic opportunities open to us. So we have to think about potentially an area of opportunity is in AI bias test software. And we are thinking that because out of our consultations, and I'm sure this is something you know about the Caribbean, we are a very pluralistic region. We've got lots of races, we've got lots of languages, we have lots of different people coming to the region. That gives us a benefit on being able to spot blind spots related to bias in AI software. The other really big thing is that AI in training these systems, they use a lot of energy. So can we work on looking at more efficient ways to train artificial intelligence systems? Because this energy optimization is a global issue. If we can solve this, we're going to have global application of this solution. Of course, I talked about our linguistic plurality. We've got several languages, several national languages and local languages in the region. So how can we use that to support inclusion online, to support e-translation, for example? We know that 90% of the internet is in English. So can we use some of our other skills, our French speaking countries, our Spanish speaking countries? Can we have a focus on how we can develop the linguistic plurality of the internet? On the monetization side, we have to figure out how we're going to structure our data to extract value. Someone mentioned that. We have to have structured information. We have tons of information here in the region. For example, in Jamaica, we have an open data portal. It's been open for a number of years now, but when you go into open data portal and you look at the documents that are in there, they're not ready to be used for consumption of AI systems, which means that if I'm a private company and I go to the open data portal and pull down some weather information, for example, I will have to incur some costs and incur some time input into translating that content into something that I can use. So can we, as a region, make sure that our publicly available information, which we have a lot of, is structured in a way that it can be consumed by AI systems? And in this structuring, I believe that there's a lot of new jobs that can be created. We're going to need people to understand data and understand it at the very basic level, right? There's going to be people that are going to take PDF documents and transform them into a format that we can use. So there's lots of opportunity for monetization of existing data that we have in the region. And how do we promote data services with all of that? How do we create new experiences like e-tourism? How do we take the creative services, the creative industries, and apply them to artificial intelligence to have our own unique sort of AI from the region? And we definitely need mentoring, training, and accelerator programs for women, youth, and disabled people. So how do we get those in? How do we monetize those? And how do we enable innovation in the region? We're talking about wealth generation, new products, productivity and efficiency gains, customer service gains, revenue generation, a diversification of our economy, increase in trade, and maybe there's an opportunity to help with knowledge services and translation services. So upskilling, we've got a lot of work to do in this area, because the training for artificial intelligence should not only happen at the tertiary sector. It's not something that's reserved only for university people. We have to figure out how we get this upskilling into younger populations in our secondary schools so that they are understanding the value of these new skill sets in the future. And how do we democratize the future of our digital transformation so that everybody can take part in it? So that is what we have for upskilling. I will stop now to see if there are any comments verbally and also in the chat.
Erica, we have Linda McDonald saying esports sounds good, but a number of comments from H. Rowley, pointing to the fact that machine learning can address both structured and unstructured data. But we'll need people who can possibly label images, voice notes, essentially the discussion you had in the previous session about cleaning the data and putting it in a format that would be useful for AI.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity there. And also you can see that in that labeling, we have to just teach people how we want the thing labeled. That to me is a way that we can democratize digital. I don't have to have a college degree in labeling data. So it's really about how we enable everybody in the society to take part. And there will be a lot of opportunity in structuring this data that we have existing and also creating new data in a structure that can be interrogated by AI.
Erica, as you spoke about innovation and monetization, one thing that struck me is that a lot of this, in terms of groups of innovators, entrepreneurs, software developers, and other stakeholders in the supply chain, in the Caribbean in particular, I think a lot of this presumes equitable access to data. There is that real issue of the centralization and control of data that will have serious implications for the innovation that we're talking about here. And so I'm just flagging it. I don't know whether in fact, it relates to monetization, it relates to legislation, intellectual property, but I just want us to make a note, and also to principles. Equitable access to data is something we're going to have to wrestle with.
Okay, got it, and I agree. Okay, upskilling. So we have a lot of work to do here, but you know, as we lose jobs, we are going to be creating new jobs. So hopefully we can create some new jobs for our region. Okay.
H. Raleigh, you'd like to make a comment?
Hi, yes, H. Roll. To the point about persons being displaced once AI would have come on and stuff like that, the point I was trying to make is that we need to realize that we are not driven by AI. AI is driven by us. So the more we broaden our horizons, the deeper we go in terms of upskilling and getting more qualifications and stuff like that, then AI would, in that regards, we would not be challenged by AI. So my point is AI can only be better based on how much we upgrade ourselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does completely. So I think what I'm hearing from you is a sense of urgency that we have to start looking at this area and upgrading ourselves, because we're only going to be as good in AI as our human resources. So we need more investment in this area of upskilling and education all across the levels, as I talked about. We don't want AI and the opportunities here to just be something for highly educated people to be able to access. We want everybody in our regions to be a part of this upskilling and to be a part of the digital future. Okay, so we're going to go to the next principle, which is principle number 5. And this one, this one is about preservation. So we're going to have a really deep conversation about information and data and why it's important. So this area of preservation is kind of a unique area. I've not seen it in any of the other principles that I've reviewed globally. And remember, part of, I think, of what we're trying to do in our creation of this roadmap is to make sure that we highlight what is very unique about us in the region and make sure that it's preserved, and also determine how we can use this uniqueness to gather and gain economic power for ourselves, and maybe even transfer that to other parts of the world. So this area of preservation has to do all with our cultural identity, our unique histories that we have on each one of our islands. It has to do with our unique geoheritage sites that we have. And how are we going to capture that? How are we going to transform all of this rich information that we have in each one of our countries? How are we going to digitize it and then monetize it? So when we look at preservation of our culture, we want to look at data capture. We want to look at launching perhaps regional preservation programs. We want to establish regional data banks. There was a concept around our national archives. We have lots of really important cultural information in our national archives in each of our countries. How do we digitize that information? And who should keep that information? I think the National Archives should keep the digital data banks of our cultural history, but we have to get all of that analog and 2D data into a format now that can be leveraged. And I think we can recruit and train our youth, our women, our disabled people, and creatives in this area to handle data. We have lots of data that's unstructured, not in the right format. Can we launch some preservation programs to capture and transform and align that data? We need storage solutions. I talked about that. What we don't want to happen is go through all this effort to digitize our data and then send our data somewhere else to live. We want our digital data to live in our region, and we have to put in storage solutions. We have to get some servers. We have to develop regional storage platforms. This is an area where we can collaborate together. What's really nice about this is you think about, we could establish a network of regional storage platforms that's distributed throughout our region. So if we have a hurricane coming in one region, we have a backup in another region. So we can use kind of our geography of the region to spread out these storage platforms, and then we can have creatives, women, disabled people, youth, working on transforming our resources and uploading them to those storage locations. So data preservation, I think I've touched on this. We need to clean our public data, lots of open data that either needs to be classified, labeled, archived, and managed. Great news is that, yeah, technology can help us. So let's see how our artificial intelligence can help us with structured and unstructured information. And again, this is a prime area where we can integrate our youth, our creatives, women, disabled, in archival and cleaning services. It's going to be a new industry. It is a new industry. We're going to have new professionals in that industry. It would be great to be able to be at the cusp of that and to be pioneering in that new industry globally. All right, so the data. How do we monetize the data? How do we create these augmented virtual reality experiences? How do we increase our financial literacy around this area of monetization of data and the value of data and information? One of the ideas that we came out with was a 3D mapping of Caribbean small island developing state capitals. And so that would give youth, women, disabled, other people an opportunity to go out and become closer with our capitals, with our unique geoheritage sites, to capture that so that we can really have a digital mapping, a 3D representation of all the important things that are worth saving and worth digitizing in our capitals across our Caribbean. So that's just a way to get people working. It's for the good. It's our national good as well. It's cataloging what we have and getting people to work on this very, very important area, an area that is unique to us in our principles, the principle of preservation. And of course, we're hoping that we're going to get accurate digital data out of this. We want to see how we could enable virtual cultural heritage preservation, get people back prideful about capturing what we have and then using it for the future. So area number 5, preservation, are very unique. It has to do with our cultural heritage, the things that we identify ourselves so very closely with, is an important principle in our Caribbean roadmap. So I'd like to open the floor now for questions and comments about this area of preservation.
If not, we can move to sustainability.
This session is going so well. We don't have anybody answering questions. You guys have to give us some more feedback now. So sustainability is our last principle. So let's look and see what we have under that. We have 2 areas under sustainability. First of all is this concept of sustainability has to deal with our global goals. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the goals that we have globally for our development. How are we going to address that with artificial intelligence? The very first thing that we identified was that we wanted to have AI in our region be of service to humanity. And we wanted to use AI as a tool to help us to reach our global goals in sustainability. We wanted to be able to leverage our human assets. Someone in the other consultation spoke about people, disabled people, having very unique human assets and benefits that we could put to work in this area. They have blind people, for example, have superhuman hearing and auditory capabilities. We know that audio and voice is an important aspect within artificial intelligence. It's a really important growing area. How do we put our people that are blind people in the region, how do we extract from them their values and also have it be implemented in our systems and be a unique offering that we have here in the region? So we have some human assets here that have some unique perspectives that could be used really when we look at employing AI in service to humanity. The global goals, we're still struggling to meet those goals. A lot of people around the world are still struggling, but the small island developing states are really, really in a disadvantaged position because of our structural histories. So how can we use technology and artificial intelligence to leapfrog, to use it to solve some of our big developmental problems like our poverty, right? How do we use it to reduce poverty? How do we use AI to have clean energy in the region? We have high cost of energy in the region, very inefficient old grids, all of that. So how do we make sure that we can implement AI so that we can have a clean energy, we can have economic development for women and youth, we can have gainful employment of our youth in the area. How do we make sure that we are reducing the gender gap using AI? There's about maybe 5 or 6 of the global goals that we identified that we wanted to list here. But I wanted to open it up now for questions on sustainability. How can AI be used as a tool for service to humanity? And how can AI be used in the region to help us to attain our global goals? And of course, we're looking at sustainable development, that elusive thing that we have been searching for ever since a lot of us got our independence. Sustainability, thoughts on that? I will welcome thoughts on that now.
I think, Erica, we could, is there someone who was going to speak?
No, Corday, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I would just wanted to say, I think it would be fair to say to this group that in the last session, it was taken as a no-brainer. I think people just agreed that artificial intelligence can advance the sustainable development goals. And as you said, we were pointed to some specific goals, 1, 8, 9, 10, 16 as illustration. So I'm not surprised this isn't engendering debate. So I would want to take the opportunity as I'm on the floor. I see Lindell saying correct, having regard to time being of the essence and the next session being up on us to say, Erica, that I know that you would agree with me that apart from those who have commented, and thank you, Loy, I see Loy agreeing as well. So there's general consensus on the sustainable development goals that AI can help with the transformation and the range of issues that are to be addressed under the SDGs. But I was saying, apart from those who have commented in the chat or written up on the feedback form, we certainly are not treating silence as consent, but the other C, contemplation. And so we are inviting you to make your comments, not just on what this excellent presentation Erica has made and the grid that has helped us to distill this 50-page document, but we're asking you to actually go through the document and to bring your own value to it, because after all, it is a tool. It's a policy brief, but it is not intended for policy makers in the sense of our leaders. One of the characteristics of the digital society is the diffusion of leadership, which is a very good thing. And UNESCO itself has been emphasizing multi-stakeholder and omni-stakeholder involvement in governance. So we have to weigh in on these issues, which is why we're taking this approach to AI. A bottom-up approach is what we're recommending in the region. So please go through the document using Erica's template as a guide. And we would like to get your feedback within a week because we want to crystallize and finalize this document. Do you have any final comments you'd like to make, Isabel?
Yes, thank you, Cordell. Well, I think we had a very good discussion, including all the comments in the chat. So I wanted to thank again, Broadcasting Commission and Mr. Cordell Green, his team. Also, thanks to Erica. You did a really great job. I believe that today we discussed very important principles, and each one of these principles cover a large number of very important themes and concrete issues. I think that then we were certainly available to gather really valuable inputs and comments. Thanks to all of you participating with us today. And this brings me to anticipate that we will have an excellent output from the workshops, namely the Caribbean Artificial Intelligence Policy Roadmap. And we look forward to the update of the draft and seeing incorporated the critical inputs emanating from the discussions that were just held. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Isabel, for being such an important pillar, and to your team at UNESCO as well. And thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules all to participate. We see some familiar faces and names, and you've brought value to this process in the webinars we have had, and we are getting your comments as well via email. We have put in the chat the email address. We welcome your further comments. Remember, this is our document that we're going to hand over to technocrats and policymakers. So it should reflect our sentiments and priorities. So we have 7 days, please, to send feedback. And we see comments of congratulations to Erica, and we join in those for what has been an excellent presentation. Thank you all, and thanks to the BCJ team. Have a wonderful day all, and we will be in touch.
Thank you. Have a good day.